Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I'm excited for this one. This is one that you guys have been asking for, and I think you're gonna really enjoy it. I'm gonna talk you through just a bunch of the different industries or things that helicopters are used for. And I'm just gonna break down a little bit of information about what that industry looks like, what kind of pay scale you get in that industry. This is all Canada, so these are gonna be Canadian prices, but we're gonna be looking at that, going through these different things together. All right, so let's jump right into it. The first one I'm gonna be talking about is medical services, so emergency medical services. This is also known as medevac. And medevac is a really big industry. You have a whole variety of different things that you would do with that. You could pick up people with the helicopter from an accident site, like on the side of a highway or something. Any type of accident, really. So it could be on a ski slope, on a mountain or something like that. And typically transporting them to the hospital, all right? This is a fairly well-paid industry. I would say the average pilot's getting 80 to 100,000 or something for this. And typically flying pretty nice helicopters. So that's a really good one. A lot of people strive to get into that. On average, you're looking at probably 1,500 to 2,000 hours before you can get into something like that. But that is a really fun one. The next one we're going to talk about is firefighting. And in Canada and across the world, it actually seems to be getting more and more popular, just because there's more and more fires these days. I don't know why that is, but definitely it's a big industry. A full variety of helicopters would be used to work in that industry, anywhere from like a lighter helicopter like an A-Star to a medium like a Bell 212, and then right up into the heavy helicopters like the Super Pumas and the Sikorsky S-64s, like the Sky Cranes and so forth. So that's a really, really big, wide industry. Experience-wise, you're looking at probably 2,000, 2,500 hours before you're going to be getting into that. A lot of it is water bucketing with a long line. Pay scale, it's actually an interesting one because it's a short season, but it pays really well if you're flying. And so, you know, pilots can actually make somewhere in the range of maybe 80,000 on a good season in just the summer, like in 4 months. And a lot of pilots, they'll just take that and they'll take the rest of the year off and they'll go live in the Bahamas or something like that for the rest of the year. Or they'll go to something different in the wintertime and do something different. There are some companies that actually will pack up their helicopters here in Canada. They'll ship them over to Australia or different parts of the world that are having a summer season opposite to us. And then they'll actually fight fires over there for that season. So that's definitely interesting as well. But that is definitely a big industry. The next one is law enforcement, and so any type of police force work. It's an exciting job, but it's also can be stressful, sort of quite predictable. It's very shift work kind of thing, and pay is quite reasonable as well. Typically, you're looking at around 80,000, I think, for an average RCMP or police force pilot, and that's Canadian again. Going to be different in different parts of the world, of course. In Canada, there's not nearly as much of this as there is in the US. We don't have as big of population, so we don't need it quite as much. But yeah, those helicopters, typically you're flying nice helicopters for that as well. A lot of the times they're using A-Stars, EC-120s, or bigger up into even like an EC-145 or something like that. So definitely interesting with that as well. Okay, so the next one is going to be offshore work. So this is oil and gas platform work, flying to the remote platforms out in the ocean. And it's amazing to see these platforms way, way off the coast. And these are typically being done or flown by big helicopters, quite a bit offshore, quite a ways offshore. A lot of it is IFR flying, and you're transporting anywhere between 12 and 26 passengers at a time. And this is, I would say, one of the highest paid. There's about 3 different industries that are sort of in the highest paid category. This would be one of them. I've heard up to about 250,000 for this. So definitely an interesting industry, I would say. And you'd need a fair bit of experience to get into it. Again, you're kind of hitting that magic 2,000 to 3,000 hour range with the endorsement to be able to be ATPL. So airline transport rating, so that you can fly the bigger numbers of people. All right, so that's an interesting one as well. Tourism. Tourism is probably the widest variety of helicopter work out there. When we capture that term tourism, it can mean so many different things. You could be flying something simple as a R-22 and just taking one sightseeing person, or maybe even a photographer or something, or any type of Robinson, Jet Rangers, you name it, a full variety. And then you can get into bigger helicopters as well, like an EC-130 or something. The Grand Canyon Tours is a classic example of this in Las Vegas. And so you have a whole variety of tourism. Pay is going to be a variety as well, just based on the type of work that you're doing. An experience level as well. This is a fairly entry-level job in a lot of places, but it can also be a very experienced job. So it really depends on what kind of tourism flying you're doing. If you're flying in more complicated areas, mountainous areas and so forth, you're going to need more experienced pilots. But a lot of the time, this is a way that a low-time pilot can actually get their first foot in the door and get some experience flying, building up their hours. Pay, it's going to be a range, anywhere between maybe 50 and 100,000. Really depends on what kind of helicopters you're flying, where you're flying, these types of things. Okay. Utility. So utility would be pipeline, power line patrols, those types of things. And that kind of leads me to an interesting point. When you're doing that kind of work, that's a great job, but typically that wouldn't be one company doing only that type of work. A lot of helicopter companies are doing a list of maybe 4 or 5 or 6 or even more of these things that I'm already talking about here in the same company. And so as a pilot, you can be doing a lot of different jobs depending on what day it is. So on Monday you could be doing some utility work, on Tuesday you could be doing some sightseeing work. You know, it really depends. And so companies would have this as one of the things in their mix. We're a good example of that. We do flight training, but we also have some pipeline patrol as well. And so that's just kind of one of the things that you would put in there. Experience level on that can definitely be much on the lower side. So anywhere between 500 to 1,000 hours, sometimes a lot less than that. Depends on the requirements of the company and so forth. So flight training, that kind of leads me to the next one. Flight training is the next one I want to talk about. You guys have seen a lot of that here, and that's an interesting one as well. It's very different depending on where you are in the world. Canada is a very interesting standard. We have it backwards, which I think is the right way, than the rest of the world. And so the way we have it is typically you're going to find a more experienced pilot as an instructor. And so they're going to have several thousand hours possibly. And they're going to be sharing that experience with you as a student if you're learning how to fly a helicopter. The pay scale in Canada is actually really good as an instructor. It's something that people kind of look forward to because it's a very stable job. Typically, it's more of a 8 to 5 kind of job and 5 days a week. With maybe the odd weekend flight or something, but it's fairly stable. You're home every night. You're going home to your family and stuff, so that's really nice. And depending on what class of instructor you are, of course, how much you're flying, 80 to 100,000 is a very reasonable wage as a flight instructor. The rest of the world treats it backwards, and so they actually use flight training as the first thing that you do as a very low time pilot. And that's the way that you build up your hours and your experience. Because of that, unfortunately, they typically get really low pay as well. And so as an instructor in different parts of the world, you get barely minimum wage kind of thing. It's pretty sad. So that's sad to see. The next one I want to talk about is heliskiing. Heliskiing is a fun one. It's known as either the worst job that you can possibly have and the most stressful as a helicopter pilot, or the best, most glorious job there is. And it just depends on which day you pick. So if you have a really terrible weather day, absolutely gross, but you have clients that still need to go out and you're kind of being pressured that you need to get these guys onto the slopes, it's a stressful job. Bad weather, you're just battling all kinds of forces, and so that's not fun at all whatsoever. But you go out on the very next day and it's a bluebird, blue sky, sunny day, light winds, you're flying an A-Star B3 and you're up in the mountains with fresh powder and people that are excited about being in a helicopter and being on the mountain. And it's probably one of the best jobs you could ever have because it is just so, it's just so stunning. Fresh snow up in the mountains, flying an amazing helicopter. It really doesn't get better than that. Heliskiing pilots usually make pretty good wages. You're looking at probably 80 to 100,000 a year. Again, Canadian dollars, for something like that. Next one is seismic construction. And that one typically is with large helicopters. You're going to be in that sort of the heavy category helicopters. And Sky Crane is a good example of that. And you're going to be doing all types of construction. The most common thing that you could think of would be power line construction, so building those really big towers that they use for the big transmission cables. But any type of construction work is known as seismic. And kind of in that subcategory as well would be drill moving. So anytime they're working on a remote oil site, which is the next one I'm going to be talking about, is working in oil and gas. And so when they're working in oil and gas, you've got these remote sites all over the place with oil wells that they're pulling oil out of, and you need to service these. And so there's pilots that will fly to these remote sites. They'll service the oil, the site, and then they'll fly on to the next one. So that's kind of working in the oil and gas industry, and then flying people in and out of these spots or out to different plants and so forth. So that's a whole industry on its own, which is a big industry. And you're kind of making, again, that average wage of maybe 75, 80,000 a year, maybe upwards to 100,000, depending on what you're doing in that. But part of that is as they're building, or even just as they're moving things around, you have to move these drills to these different sites. And so they'll use medium helicopters a lot of the time, or even like lighter, like an A-Star or a Bell 407 or something. And then they'll move these drills from one site to another. And that's actually pretty precise work. And you have to be fairly skilled for that, maybe around 2,000 hours for that. And that would be well paid as well, somewhere maybe in the $100,000 range, okay? I know a lot of these jobs that I'm talking about, the magic number is always in that 1,000 to 3,000 hour range. If you can get past that 1,000 hour range, you're really starting to become a very useful pilot that a company can really utilize. And so it's that initial breaking through to get to that, and I'll talk about that at the end. The other one would be corporate flying. And so corporate flying is a lot of time it's cool. You're flying for private customers. You've got a company that says, hey, I'm going to buy a helicopter. I need a pilot to fly it. You're typically flying nicer helicopters. There's a full range of this as well. You can have a small company that just has a Robinson R44 or something, and they just need you to fly them around in that. And then you have the billionaires that own the big yachts, and they own a EC 145 on the yacht, and they need a pilot to fly that as well. So you have a full variety, a wage. You're going to have a full variety at that. It could be as low as maybe $50,000 a year, right up to $150,000 a year. It really depends. It's a large spectrum. And that type of flying can be fun. It can be really cool. It's also can be a lot of stress. I've done a bit of it myself. And part of the stress of it is the client, you're always on call. The client will call you at a moment's notice and say, hey, can I go fly in an hour? I need to land downtown Portland. And you're like, well, that doesn't exactly work. There's no helipad downtown. And they're like, oh yeah, no, we got a site there. I need to land right in the site. Well, okay, it doesn't quite work like that. And so there's a lot of arranging that you have to do for things, and then a lot of negotiating of where you can actually pick them up, drop them off, those kind of things. But corporate flying can be a lot of fun as well. I've definitely enjoyed my share of it as well. So I'm going to stop the list right there, but the list goes on, and those are kind of the big highlight ones that I could just think of off the top of my mind. But the cool thing about helicopters is the list literally probably could go on for pages and pages and pages, because there's just so many unique things that you can do with a helicopter, and they just get totally out there, and the more remote and out there they get, the more exciting it is. And as a helicopter pilot, you can choose what type of work you want to be doing. Of course, in the beginning, you have to take whatever there is. As a new pilot, like I said, in Canada, tourism is going to be probably your number one job that you're going to get. And then there's different things, like even in forestry and so forth, there's some more basic flying that you can do. One that I didn't even talk about was spraying. Spraying is actually a big industry as well, and agricultural spraying. That can be a lower time pilot's job as well. A lot of these jobs that I mentioned, once you've been working for a company for a while, doing some ground crew work and stuff, they're going to slowly get you into a lot of these jobs. Even if their requirement is much higher, they're going to be able to get you in a little bit here, a little bit there, and you really just got to get your foot in the door and be the right person that they want to get flying. I'm going to do another video about that next week as well, which I think you guys are going to really enjoy. And so being the right person is part of the big thing. And once they trust you, then they're going to start putting more time and effort and money into you to be able to get you those hours. Once you crest past that sort of 1,000-hour, magic 1,000-hour mark, 1,500, 2,000 hours, it starts ramping really fast once you cross the 1,000-hour mark. And then the world really opens up to you. And like I say, if you want to, put on a suit and tie and go to work every day, you can do that as a helicopter pilot. If you want to just wear your jeans and boots and so forth, and work out in the, in the woods, out in the remote areas and stuff like that, you can do that. If you, if you want to work in a uniform and be a police officer or something like that, or medevac pilot, you can do that as well. You can live in the city, you can live remotely, you can live in whatever place you want and then just travel to where the work is. A lot of work as a helicopter pilot is shift work, and so you'll spend 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and you'll travel to where you're going to be going to do your job, and then you go back home to wherever it is that you want to live. Or a month on, month off. When you're working in something like oil and gas, sometimes it's 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off, and so you spend a lot more time at work, but then you spend a lot of time at home as well, and so you get to spend time with the family and stuff that way as well. So it is a very unique industry in the fact that it is so varied. There's so many different aspects to it that you can really, once you get enough experience, you can really kind of start calling the shots and say, you know what, I want to live this kind of lifestyle, and so I'm going to become this type of pilot. And it's also a job where if you get tired of the thing that you're doing, it's very easy to be able to shift gears and fly different types of helicopters in different area, different scenery, different clients altogether. And it feels like you have a new career, but you're still flying helicopters, which is the baseline of what you're passionate about, what you really love doing. That's why you got into this in the first place. So this is a bit of an overview on some, not all, some of the different types of helicopter jobs in the industry. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, same thing as last time. If you guys found value in this, if you want to help me out, I would absolutely love it if you guys would like this video, send some comments down below. If there's jobs that you guys are doing, if you guys are in the helicopter industry and you're doing jobs that I haven't mentioned on here, put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. Let's see if we can find the most unique job that I haven't even thought about that you are doing as a helicopter pilot, and leave it in the comments below. Share it with the community that we have here. That would be really fun. I'd really appreciate that. And then share this video. So if you think somebody is looking for a different career, they're changing gears, they're interested in doing something different, they're not quite sure what they're going to do, share this with them and see if they have any interest with this type of work. So that would be really helpful for me as well. If you guys haven't already, please subscribe, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I'm posting another video. And I think that's it for now. We're going to talk to you guys on the next one. See ya.